Today we're going to be learning routing in Pro Tools. We recorded 5 different microphones on 4 different drum instruments. And what we're going to do is route effect sends and submix routing. So the first thing we want to do is import the stems. Once you download the stems, they show up inside your downloads folder. I got a zip file which I double clicked on, and then once I expanded that, I have a folder of all the stems. So in Pro Tools, to import audio, there's other ways of doing this, but what I'm going to do today is basically highlight all of the stems here, all of these WAV files, and drag those onto what's called the edit window, this little gray area here. Drop these files and they all show up in tracks. All the numbers at the end of these tracks dictate which instrument. We want to put all the O1s next to one another. We can just do that by dragging and moving these tracks up so that they're all next to each other. So I have the O1s, my O2s, and my O3s all together. So I know ahead of time that the O1s are the snares. These tracks right here are the hi-hats. Then finally down at the bottom, those are kicks. So first thing is to color code these so that they're easy to see. So if I highlight the first nameplate of a track and go to the final nameplate of the track and hold down the shift key, I can highlight all these tracks at once. Double click on the color bar at the end, and I want to change this to some kind of color, whatever color. So I go to the O2s, which are the hi-hats. I'm going to select all of the O2 tracks, and I can double click on the color bar and maybe go yellow or gold because these are hi-hat symbols. Kick drums, which I'll just leave as blue. Okay, now I'm using command equals sign to switch between the edit view and the mix view. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is group these tracks together. So in the bottom of the left side, there's a group window and then a tracks list window. If you don't see these, this little guy right here, this little button here is the show and hide. If I go ahead and highlight all of the snare drums once again, and I use the key command G, I can create a new group. So this is the snare group, so I title it SNR, short for snare. You can see all the instruments that are in that group, the O1s, all with the number O1 at the end. And good to go. I'm going to create that group, and then down here it appears as a group. So I'm going to do that with all the other ones too. So these are the hi-hats. I'm going to select those, command G to group them. I'm going to call it hi-hat, and then I'm going to choose OK, and then finally down to all of the drums. Command G. Now check this out. If I highlight or de-highlight these, I can control which group I want to manipulate things on all at the same time. So for instance, if I select the snare, you can see the snare group is selected there, and I use command equals to go back to the mix view here. If I move the faders, they all move at the same time. Solo buttons all work at the same time. If I undo that, you can move things individually. So it's kind of useful if you want to move every fader at once. You can select all and boom, they all move at the same time. Cool. So that's creating groups of tracks. So we're going to do routing next. Basically, we need stereo auxiliary input tracks. That's what we use for routing submixes or effect sends. So first of all, I've got the group of snare drums tracks, the group of hi-hats, the group of kick drum tracks, and like I want to add maybe some reverb and maybe a distortion, some overdrive to some of the sounds. So that's 5 different auxiliary input tracks. 3 of those are going to be for routing submixes, and then 2 of those are going to be for adding effects. So let's go ahead and create 5 new auxiliary input stereo tracks. We're going to first use command Shift and N. That's the keyboard shortcut for creating new tracks. We can type in 5, so we're creating 5 tracks. If you hold down command, this is another shortcut. If you hold down command and use the left and right arrows, you can switch between stereo and mono. And if you hold down command and you use up and down, you can switch between the track types. So we want stereo auxiliary inputs, 5 of them. Okay, good to go. We create those, and what we can see is that there are these 5 new stereo auxiliary inputs. The next thing we want to do is label them and solo safe them. So when you solo a track, basically what happens is it mutes every other track, even auxiliary inputs. And the problem is if you're routing this sound through this track and it's muted, you're not going to hear it. what you can do is hold down Command and you click on the solo button and it grays it out. So we want to do that to all of the auxiliary input tracks, because what's going to happen is we're going to route this sound into one of these tracks, and now it's going to go through these tracks because it's not muted anymore. That's solo safing. Next we want to label these. So I'm going to double click on the nameplate of the auxiliary 1 track. I'm going to call this the snare sub. The next is going to be the hi-hat. Next is going to be the kick drum sub. So kick sub. And then these other two are going to be reverb and distortion. So go ahead and add reverb and then distortion, D-I-S-T for short. The next thing to do is route. We're going to use what's called buses. So buses are like a imaginary wire that you can use to route the signal from one place to another place. On the top of the track we have inserts. This is where we're going to add plugins later, different types of plugin effects and stuff. Sends are going to send a portion of the signal to another location. And we have our inputs and outputs where we will route the audio. So the first thing we're going to do is I want to choose all of my snare tracks. And I want to route the outputting via a bus all the way over here to the snare auxiliary input track. Alright, so what I'm going to do is hold down Option and Shift, which allows me to do something to every single selected track simultaneously. I hold down Option and Shift, and I choose a open bus. So if I went up here, I could choose, it used to be called bus 1 and 2. I want to send stereo buses because they're going to stereo auxiliary input tracks, so these have to be stereo. So you pick, it doesn't matter which one, you pick any bus that's a stereo bus, and then you have those across all 5 of these different tracks. I like to rename my buses so that I know what the heck they are and where they're going. So if I right click on this, I can choose rename, and I can call it the snare bus. Okay, so that snare bus needs to go somewhere, because if I press play, you're not going to hear any sound. There's no end of this wire. We just have it plugged in here, and the other end is not plugged in anywhere. So we need to plug that wire in. Let's go to the snare sub track, and the input is where we want the audio to show up. So I choose from the output plate, from the bus category, and I choose the snare bus. Now, the audio has a destination. It's been routed from here through here. Now, whenever I solo one of these tracks from the kick drum, I have kick now coming through there. When I highlight or solo something from the hi-hat category, it's going to come out of the hi-hat track, submix track, and then if I solo something from the snare category, it's going to come out of here. So the next thing we need to do is route for the effects sends. So basically how effects sends work is you're going to take a portion of the signal from this track and you're going to route it somewhere else in parallel. When you put a send on a track and you turn up that fader, that controls how much of this signal is going to leave this one track and travel to a new location. So I need sends across not only the kick drum tracks, the hi-hat, but also all the snares. So I highlight the snares and the kicks and the hi-hats. All of the instrument tracks are highlighted, and I'm going to hold down Option and Shift. I'm going to choose the first sends category and choose the next available bus and rename it. I already had it renamed, so here's this verb bus. And then I can go ahead and choose stereo bus, which you guys might go ahead and select this one, but I already named one earlier, so here's the distortion bus. You just rename that yourself, and then you have distortion bus. And then you need to set that to correlate with the input of these tracks, these auxiliary input tracks marked reverb and distortion. So the input now is going to be set to the verb bus on the verb track, and then the distortion track, I'm going to have that set to, you guessed it, distortion. So with the verb bus, I'm going to create a reverb insert here. So the inserts are where we put audio devices or effects. When you hit the insert category, I can choose a multi-channel plugin, reverb, non-linear reverb is going to be the one I'll choose. Presets are located under the preset factory preset tab. So if you click on that, you can choose from all these presets. I'm going to choose medium hall. And then on the distortion track, I need a distortion plugin. So I choose the first send, and I'm going to choose something under the harmonic category, the air distortion. All of these send plates right here can be exposed by clicking and holding down command and clicking on the left corner edge of this, and it expands and allows you to view faders for all of the sends. So basically how sends work is if I solo the snare drum here, I can up the amount of reverb in parallel with the original sound. You'll find the right mix of reverb sounds from these different individual snare drums. So zooming in on Pro Tools, first of all you need to make sure that the command key focus, this little AZ, is selected in orange, and then T and R basically zoom in on your waveforms. You also want to make sure that you're in slip mode so that you are able to select anywhere. You're not stuck in grid mode to where you're only able to select within the grid. I like to be in the smart tool mode where you have all of these tools available simultaneously wherever you put your cursor. If it's at the top, it's a selector tool. If it's at the bottom, it's the grabber. Or you can put fades on pieces of audio by going to the upper right or upper left corner. And then of course there's the trim tool. If you go to the edge of audio, you can trim the beginning or the end of the region. So Command E works anywhere. If I just put a little incision or put my cursor anywhere and I hit Command E, it splits the track right at that location. So when I zoom way in, I can see the waveforms here. I can check and see how the phasing is. See how these waves line up. Probably put another trim a little bit closer to the beginning of this audio. I want to put a fade on the beginning of these. So I can put the fade tool one at a time, or I can highlight a region of the audio waveform, and with Command F it brings up the fade. Basically it allows me to add fades all at the same time. Okay, it's pretty much done by somewhere over here, so I'm going to make this the ending. Go ahead and put a trim there and then add a fade on the back end just to make sure that there's no weird cracks or pops. Do that. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and mix this together, make sure I like the levels, so kind of adjust the faders accordingly. I also want to be careful and look at my signal, make sure I'm not coming off too hot on the outputs and I'm not peaking or anything here. I can also mix in the amount of snare drum distortion, bring up some of the brighter elements of it. I can do my reverbs over here. So if I highlight or just select one of these, you can see the time ruler has its selection set to and around this piece of audio, which is perfect. Usually I just select that one piece of audio, make sure it's soloed, everything looks good. I go to File, Bounce to Disk, or you can use Option Command B. We're going to go with Wave. I want to have the format set to interleaved. Bit depth you want to set to 16-bit, sample rate 44.1. To label this, I need to be careful about my location, so I can set my location to where this is being saved. Maybe choose offline, and then I bounce, and that file is going to show up now on my desktop. Okay, cool. Got my snare sound. I can audition it by hitting the space bar. I do that with all my other tracks, and what's going to happen is you'll have 4 audio tracks, and you want to put those in a folder. So if you create a folder, right click on the anywhere and title that folder properly. So I've got a new folder. I can drag all my pieces of audio or any accompanying write-up. I can put those into this folder. At this point I can right click on that folder, compress, and I have a zip file now, and that can be dragged and dropped onto the assignment Dropbox where you turn this in under D2L. So that's how you do project number 2. Hope that helps, and we'll see you later.